But we're gonna get into a little bit of a preview of Week 1. Next week we'll get into more about Montana State. But as we saw last season, a victory is not always the number one thing to come out of Week 1, because Oregon won their game against Idaho last season, but it was not the game that everyone thought they were going to get. It was a lot closer than people thought it would be. That it was a one-score game in the fourth quarter, and people felt a lot shakier about the Ducks after that. So we're going to kind of go back and forth and break down what we think success will look like for the Ducks in Week 1. Where the areas that after Week 1, we're going to kind of be after Week 1. Was this a successful thing? Are we feeling good about this area and moving forward? Because last year, the offensive line felt a little bit questionable after Week 1. Can the defense limit those explosive plays? Felt a little bit questionable after Week 1. So, Owen, I'm going to let you go first, and then we'll go back and forth, kind of break it down what we think are the things that the Ducks need besides a win to feel like they had a successful Week 1 of this season.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm going to start right there with the offensive line. That was the biggest story coming out of Week 1 last year. I think we can say is that, they gave up, what was it, maybe 3 sacks in that game. Coming off a year where they were Joe Moore Awards finalists, people did not, you could expect a little bit of turnover because of the guys you let go to the draft. But it was much worse than people thought. And it got better throughout the year, but that was really a shock to see, especially, against an FCS team. That's what I want to see. And I think it'll work. I think this team, this group, particularly the starters we expect, are very connected. I dove into that for a little article this week for the Daily Emerald. And just the way these guys talk about each other sounds like they've been friends for years, which is hilarious because they've known each other for 6 months maybe. But they're already joking. They already like it. We talk about media day and they sound like they love each other. You hear how much these guys interact, and I think that really does matter on the field. Last year you had a group that you weren't really sure who were starting at center. It was Poncho for a little bit. It was Charlie Pickard for a little bit. Right now they have a Remington contender at center. I believe it'll work, but that's what I need to see proof that the O-line will be consistent. I think that defines the success of Dante Moore. I think it defines how successful Makhi Hughes will be. It's the most important thing in this game.
Yeah, I think that's something interesting that Coach Lanning has kind of been saying recently, is that this is phase 5 of the offseason for them. So guys who, like Isaiah World, who committed as a transfer, I saw him on campus in February and March. These guys have been around the program for almost 8 months now. They've been, even if they haven't been necessarily on the field until the beginning of August, obviously they had practices in the spring too, but they were working out all offseason, developing that chemistry. And I think that's something, that chemistry, that's something that's going to be really important for this offensive line, because you saw it last year. They just kind of needed to find everybody into their right roles and settle things down, because last year when Matthew Bedford goes down right before the season, all of a sudden Poncho sliding from center to guard, Charlie Pickard's in the starting lineup, you're moving things all around. I think the fact that you kind of know who this group is going to be, you think what this starting group should look like on the offensive line, in terms of Isaiah World at left tackle, Emmanuel Pregnon, a really talented transfer from USC. Alik Terry was talking a lot about how his length has been super huge in pass protection and just gives him an advantage out there. Word? Yeah, right? Yeah. And to be able to have a guy with almost tackle length playing him on the interior, Poncho will lock things down. I think having a center who is going to be there, is going to get things set. He talked about how he's been trying to learn things throughout the offense from other positions to understand not just what my job is, but why this is my job. Why do I have to do this on this play to make the team successful, which I think is really awesome to see. And then obviously Matthew Bedford, getting him back and healthy. When you got him in last season, you thought you're going to have a strong guy at guard who has Big Ten starts, has experience starting at the highest levels of college football, but then you lose him for the whole season. Getting him back another year older, just a really experienced guy in there. And then Alex Harkey, another transfer, but a really experienced guy. And like you said, just the chemistry that they've been able to develop when you have really four transfers. Bedford didn't transfer this year, but came in last year. Developing that chemistry together, I think, will be interesting to see. And in terms of keeping Dante Moore upright and on his feet, that's going to be necessary for his success. And then opening those lanes for Makhi Hughes. Dave Iuli's a guy who could work in there too. Played a pretty good amount at guard last year when when they had some injuries later in the season. But I think developing that chemistry, finding a solidified rotation, or not rotation, because you don't really want to be rotating your offensive line, but finding your solidified roles within that offensive line will be really important to see. Um, I didn't really necessarily plan this out, but I was texting you earlier, and I was kind of figuring out what we were going to be talking about for this show today, and you kind of picked out a couple offensive things to look for in week one. So I went to the other side of the ball, and the number one thing for me that the Ducks need to be successful in is finding success on early downs against the run against this Montana State team. Because last year, Tasha Lupo talked about it. They were feeling good about where they were at the end of the regular season in terms of the run defense, but then you go play Penn State. Penn State rushes pretty well, and then Ohio State puts up some big. All of a sudden, Travion Henderson's breaking away for some big runs, and it tanked some of the numbers at the end of the season in terms of the yards per carry and all that stuff that Oregon, the goals that the defense wants for themselves. So Montana State is a team that last year ran the ball more times than any other FCS team and finished with 1,200 more rushing yards than North Dakota State, who is this number two FCS teams in terms of rushing yards. They got a new quarterback in this season. They lost their quarterback last year, who also put up 1,000 rushing yards. They had two running backs last year put up 1,000 rushing yards. It's going to be a different team for them, but we know that's what they want to do. And can the Ducks, fill those gaps on early downs and stop the run and be able to get into advantageous situations? Because what Montana State's offense is built on is we're going to run. If we're running for 5 to 6 yards on first down, it's going to set up an easy second down. And if we can get even closer on third down, it's going to be even easier. Or we can run for 5 yards again, and then all of a sudden it's a first down. So how do Betcher and Devin Jackson look kind of, filling the A gap, filling the B gap, being able to hit those holes downfield and scrape across the top and be able to do all the things that you need to do to be a successful linebacker defending the run? And can Amari Washington have the stamina, to be defending the run on early downs and then rushing the passer later? And do you have guys that can be penetrators in the way that like a guy like Derek Harmon was last year, where he's in the backfield and stripping the ball from Quinshot Judkins in front of everybody at Autzen? So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that goes for them, especially against in an FCS team, but it still is a test as a run defense, because this is an FCS team that likes to run the ball and has done it very successfully.
Yeah, and I mean, when we talk about how much this secondary needs to prove itself, probably a little bit more than the defensive or the front seven. Get success on early downs against the run is what's going to not put that unit on the back foot. You want to put it in situations it understands how to control this secondary. And what you don't want is to have it consistently in second and short, having to worry about shot plays, having to worry about this team that is really strong running the ball, that you have to commit defenders to that way. Defending the pass unassisted. That it's going to be important. Not only just in terms of stopping Minnesota, Montana State's rushing attack, but in terms of
to stop Minnesota later in the season. Yeah,
they will. In terms of giving this secondary a really nice place to start the season from.
Yeah, what's the next spot that you're kind of looking to for the offense to find success in this Montana State game?
I'm looking at all these, and they really do all matter because of the offensive line. But I am curious how Makhi Hughes adapts to this team. Obviously we won't see him play an FBS team, that first week. But I want to see what he looks like behind a Big Ten offensive line, one that we expect to be one of the best in the nation. I'm curious if he looks like the same guy he looked like at Tulane, because, if he has that pop early, that means good stuff, not only for Oregon's run game, but also, it takes a little bit of the pressure off a guy like Dante Moore to create. It takes a little bit of pressure off the wide receiver core to be the big play. If you can get, like we said, with the Montana State offense, if you can get into second and short consistently, that opens up so many things for your offense, especially an offense like Oregon.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the thing. And in terms of opening up the pass game as well, too, can you take things off of Dante Moore's plate and, get him into advantageous situations on 2nd and 5 where you feel you're comfortable taking a shot to Decore and more deep down the sideline, or trying to hit Kenyon Sadiq on a deep post over the middle and utilize some run after the catch and get some explosive gains, because I can take a bit of a risk here on 2nd and 5 or 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4, whatever, because yeah, it's going to be 3rd and 4, and I
Yep.
know I can convert that in when I have guys who can make plays after the catch in a short yardage passing situation. So Makhi Hughes, a really talented guy at Tulane, but it's been Tulane. It hasn't been the top levels of college football. It's been the American Athletic Conference. It's not the Big Ten. It's as powerful and as explosive as we think he is, and from what we've seen on tape from him at Tulane, he hasn't done it at the highest levels of college football before. So we'll have to see what that looks like in the Big Ten. I think he's a guy that can absolutely do that, and I think they're going to be wanting to run the ball with him early. I would expect him to get. I think Oregon comes out that first drive against Montana State, and they give the ball to Makhi Hughes like 5+ times on that drive, and they're trying to just run the ball down Montana State's throat and establish this is what a Big Ten offensive line looks like. This is what Big Ten running looks like, and we are bigger, we're stronger, we're better than you, and we're just going to bully you and kind of move the ball down the field like we want to.
Yeah, they must have watched that Clint Kubiak drive, man.
Exactly. Looked pretty good for the
Yeah,
Seahawks
listen,
there.
if that's what I see Oregon come out and do that first drive, I think that could be one of the like potentially the best thing that could happen.
Absolutely. All right, moving to back to the other
Where we
side of
going
the
on
ball.
defense?
I think being able to generate pressure with 4 rushers, I think, is going to be
Mm,
really important for this team. Last year, they had a lot. They had such a strong core of the 5 guys in that starting group that they had with Mateo and Tatum coming off the edge, and then Jordan Birch obviously being an absolute beast, moving inside outside, kind of a joker you can move all over the field a little bit, and be able to create havoc from anywhere. But can Mateo kind of really be that guy that can create pressure one-on-one by himself, and you don't have to bring extra blitzers? You can be able, when you do have a young safeties, a young secondary, can you like you not have to bring those extra rushers and be able to give as much as you can to that secondary, cover up everything, and then be able to get after the quarterback and get off the field on 3rd downs? I think is going to be really important to see. How does Bear Alexander do as a 3 tech and be able to
yep.
get to the quarterback? And then I think also some of those other guys too. I think, can Elijah Rushing be that guy that comes in on 3rd downs and gets after the quarterback? And Tatum Tuiyoti's been playing really good run defense on early downs. Obviously, you want Tatum to get his pass rush opportunities too, but then you bring in Elijah Rushing. He's fresh. He hasn't been out there, and he can just go get after the quarterback. I think if you can do that, it goes hand in hand with what I said earlier. Finding the success on early downs to create advantageous situations on 3rd downs where you can, send 4, and then all of a sudden, if you want to, then you bring that blitz that really throws them off every once in a while, and then you can get some big sacks, maybe force an interception, force a forced fumble, and then create a turnover that can really change the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be one of the important things, especially against a new quarterback, right? You want to make
Mhm.
him uncomfortable, and if you can make it uncomfortable with 4, that's always better.
Yeah, going back to the other side of the ball, where's this last point you want to hit in terms of finding success for this Oregon offense in week 1?
I mean, it's the big question really, which is assuming Dante Moore is the starter, how comfortable is he? Because the big issue at UCLA was a low completion percentage. It was lots of interceptions. Um, we just never really saw him get comfortable. Behind an offensive line that wasn't the best. Getting kind of inconsistent starts and getting put into games late after they pulled guys. I think if you can just see him come out there and be a point guard, really
Mm-hmm.
we know he has the arm talent. And it'd be great if he can show that. But really, what he needs to prove is that he can be calm and methodical and mature, which are all things I think he has in him. But that's what you want to see, especially, if this game ends up being closer, like that Idaho one was, Dylan Gabriel was important in that game because he had been in situations like that, because he's not a guy getting his first start in a situation he doesn't want to be in. Dante Moore has starting experience. If it's Austin Novosad, he hasn't had a start before. Yeah, I want to see the maturity, and I want to see how comfortable he is. Whether or not that offensive line holds up like we expect it to.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing a game like what last year's game to start the season looked like for Dylan Gabriel, where he was like over 40 completions for like 350 something yards. For Dante Moore, not necessarily to that level. I don't need it to be, because I think that they should be running the football more, because they should probably be up in this game and not needing to stage late drives to make sure you're putting things away. But I would like to see him like you said, point guard the offense and be able to take those little shots and just look comfortable, look like he's been familiar with the system, which he should be at this point because he's been practicing in it for the last year. So I want that to show up on the field and that he does know this offense. He knows where his guys are going to be, and he's able to take the layups when they're there. And then when he does see that opportunity for a big play, can you capitalize it and make those explosives and just protect the football, keep your offense on the field, and don't give up anything that's going to kind of change this game in a negative way.
Absolutely. I think that, we talked about how important the offensive line is. I think I'll stick with that as the most important thing. You still have one more to get to. Is your next one the most important thing for defense?
No, I think those first two is really where the game plan starts. But I think this is going to be interesting to see too. Just you got to make sure you're limiting explosives too. The Dan Lanning has talked about how the defense did a really good job of that has done a good job of that in their scrimmages and stuff so far. And I think that's going to be important to see for this team because it became a little bit of a problem at the end of last year and in terms of the downfall of the team in that Ohio State game and even in some of that Penn State game in the Big Ten championship where if you have miscommunicate, I wrote in my notes here, communicate. When you have a guy like Dylan Thieneman who has experience, but he's going to be surrounded by young guys in the secondary, whether that's Kingston Lopa or Aaron Flowers next to him at safety, whether that's Dalen Austin at the nickel, you're going to have guys who haven't really played together. So can they communicate on that backside and keep everything in front of you is what I wrote down here. Because last year we saw Idaho hit a flea flicker and score a 36-yard touchdown in the third quarter that all of a sudden I was watching that game with my former roommate and we were all of a sudden we were like, what's going on here? Why is Idaho hitting 36 40-yard touchdowns on Oregon? It feels like Oregon should be the team that's putting up these big explosives. You got to keep everything in front of you and don't let anything don't let anyone slip behind you. Make sure you just keep limiting them to the short gains and that they're not going to get any sort of 30, 40-yard gain that's going to give them momentum and feel like, oh, we can play with these guys and we're at this level when Oregon should really be at a different level than a team like Montana State.